Thank you, everyone. This has been an amazing conference, so let's get a round of applause for all the people who have put the work into organizing it. And also another round of applause for all the other amazing speakers we've heard from. Except for Dave. All right, so kind of weird closing out an OCaml conference because I'm probably the least experienced OCaml dev in the room, but we're gonna go for it. So maybe OCaml was the friends we made along the way. A journey of growth in software engineering. This is also going to be a journey for all of us because I did not have time to rehearse this talk, so bear with me. So this is a talk about professional growth, learning in public, mentorship, gratitude, becoming a better engineer, community, and ultimately OCaml. So I've already been introduced, but again, my name is Dillon Mulroy. I'm a software engineer at Vercel. I'm chronically online. I stream on Twitch, generally doing programming content in the mornings East Coast time. I shitpost and yap a lot on x.com, and you can find my GitHub there, and then all the links are on my personal website at dillonis.online. You can also take a screenshot of this QR code. It's going to link you to my GitHub. There will be a PDF of all my slides, so if you'd rather, I mean, we're in a pretty small room with a really big screen, but if you ever want to come back to the slides, they're on my GitHub at that QR code. So up front, I want to talk about my journey to OCaml because it's a bit unconventional. I'm in my 11th year doing software engineering professionally, and the majority of my time spent in the industry has been doing TypeScript, JavaScript, React, Node, a little bit of Go, a little bit of Elixir, and also OCaml. So my first job right out of school, right around the end of 2014, I ended up working at a company called State Farm, which is a big financial insurance company in the United States. And I was primarily working on writing an internal tool that is actually one of the first spa apps inside of State Farm. And I was doing a lot of the front end work in a cursed JS framework, which might be all JS frameworks, but this one was called EXT.js. And on the back end, originally, I guess before we turned it into a spa, I was writing Java 1.5 and struts. So real enjoyable job for your first time out of college. So fast forward on that, I switched to another job, and that was also JavaScript. This was a pretty cool job. I did defense contracting for the DoD in the United States, and I worked at like a really tiny defense contractor. So it wasn't like these Booz Allens or General Dynamics or all these companies. I worked with approximately 85 engineers or data scientists in a company that was 95 people in total. We only bid on basically greenfield new work, and we were, as far as I know, the first contractor in the DoD in the United States to use React to ship applications. So I got into React super early. So at this point, I'm kind of going down this path of specializing in JavaScript and Node, and the JavaScript ecosystem is blowing up in this time. We're going from just loading scripts in with our script tags to getting Browserify and Gulp and all these tools to Webpack, NPM's growing. So I stick around there for probably 3.5 years and more JavaScript, a little bit of Go, a little bit of Elixir, and then I ultimately leave the government and I go to work for a tech company in Seattle, which, as you may have guessed it, I also wrote JavaScript. Actually, at this time, I transitioned to TypeScript, but this job is the job that kind of changed everything for me. It was a company called Formidable, and they were a JavaScript, Node, React, GraphQL web dev consultancy that was relatively popular in the JS community around 2016 to 2021. And we had members of the React Native core team there, some people that worked on GraphQL really early. So I came into this job as very much a mid-level engineer. And I got to cut my teeth and learn from like some of the best JS devs in the world. And not only that, it was a consulting job, which, you know, my hot take on that is I think everyone should do consulting at least once, because it is hands down the thing that consistently since then has set me apart from my peers. Because at that time, you're getting dropped into different companies of different sizes. I was ending up in FANGs, I was ending up in startups, Fortune 500s. Everyone has totally different process engineering cultures. You have to get dropped in as a total stranger to these companies and build influence. And you know, a lot of the times the hardest problems in tech, I say this often, are not actually technical in nature. It's not caching, cache and validation, naming, scaling infinitely. It's actually people and process. And consulting is, if you can't build that skill set of building influence, figuring out how to be persuasive and empathetic and getting buy-in for these things, like I don't know, I think that's one of the most important skills you can have as a senior engineer. So from there, I kind of got tired of not owning the products I worked on, right? Defense contracting is super similar to consulting. Basically the same model, just the government's your place. So, you know, I was getting dropped in maybe 4 months to 8 months working on a project, generally getting hired to come clean up a dumpster fire because people don't hire consultants when things are going well. So, you know, we come in, we fix things up, ship a new app, clean it up, and then I'd never get to hear how it turned out. And I'd been doing this now for like 6.5 years, and I never had any sense of ownership in the stuff I was building. So I followed a bunch of my coworkers from Formidable to a startup called Main Street, and you have probably guessed it, but this job was also all TypeScript. At this job, I was a lead engineer on a billing and payments platform. Long story short, this job was an absolute dumpster fire, but I did get to rebuild a whole billing system from scratch, and that was super fun and super valuable. I actually put my 2 weeks notice in the day after we shipped to prod, because, you know, terrible for the mental health there. So that was job 4. Job 5 is where it happens. I get enlightened. I get to work in OCaml. I joined a company called Scalum, who is unfortunately no longer around now. But as I was looking for jobs to leave Main Street and the stressful situation I was in, I was working with a recruiter in the United States, and generally that's a miserable process, but this guy was amazing. And he lined me up with an interview with Scalum. And I was interviewing for a lead position leading the front-end team in TypeScript and React. So I interview, and my like live coding interview, just like complete 180. It's like debugging some OCaml code. I don't even remember what it was. I was just like, at this point, I don't even know if I had heard of OCaml. Like I'd probably like seen it mentioned somewhere, but like I have no concept of what this means. You know, I have been influenced up to this point by ideas in functional programming, but it didn't really mean a lot to me. Like React was introducing a lot of FP concepts to kind of mainstream people through there, right? I programmed Elixir, but I was so junior at the time, I didn't really understand the benefits of the things I was working with. But when I got here, like everything changed. And like, I don't know if Adam, who is the CTO, is watching, but I cannot give you enough thanks and gratitude because that job kind of changed everything for me. So yeah, thank you for betting on me. So unfortunately, like I said, the doors of this company shuttered early this year. I found out on January 2nd, due to some regulation stuff, one of our, basically, we were banking on a client and some money that just fell through and we couldn't fundraise. It was an institutional DeFi company, so like with interest rates going up and FTX all happening, like there was just really no chance of raising money to keep it going. So I start interviewing again on January 2nd of this year, and one of my former coworkers from Formidable had been working at Vercel for 2 or 3 years, and we had talked a couple times about me coming over there, just timing didn't work out right. And the day after I found out that Scalum would be shutting down, she posted on Twitter about an open role on her team and interviewed and ended up at job 6, TypeScript, as you may have guessed. At least for now. So I'm back to writing TypeScript. I love TypeScript. It's made my career. It's my bread and butter. But after having worked in OCaml professionally for 2 years, it's just like, you get a taste of like the goodness. And like up until this point, like I had like my idea of what it meant to be a type language. My experience was Java, Go, and TypeScript. And like I didn't have a very good college education, so I don't have like any strong academic background. So like I'm like, oh, any language that has types is gonna look like Java and TypeScript. Like that's just what it is. And then I write OCaml. I'm like, oh, a type system can work for me instead of against me. So next, I want to talk a little bit about my experience learning OCaml. So up until this point of joining Scalum, stepping back a little bit to job number 5, I had always been a full stack engineer in every position. And like I genuinely love working in the front end, and I genuinely love solving problems in the back end. And if I were to continue that trend, it would necessitate learning OCaml, because Scalum used OCaml for everything. All of our back-end services were on OCaml. We had an Excel plugin that was written in OCaml. Our admin web app was written in OCaml and compiled with Melange. So, as I'm, warming up and getting used to the front end, and once I feel things are, have things under control in TypeScript land, I'm like, all right, it's time. So day 1, I cloned down the API repo, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna, I was feeling a little cocky, right? I'm like, I'm just gonna start at the, API route handlers. Like, this is gonna feel like every other language I've ever worked in. And this was kind of the experience. I'm looking around, there's a bunch of these like let operators with weird symbols on it. We've got the double nerd arrows going on. I'm like, I don't know what any of this is. Day 2, I'm like, all right, we're gonna go back to this. We're gonna get it today, right? Not quite. I quickly find myself in part of the code base that is making very heavy use of functors and first-class modules. Like I don't even know if I've like really seen pattern matching yet in the code. So I'm just like in deep over my head. I'm like, this is gonna be rough. It's gonna be a rough one. So day 3, I kind of rethink my strategy a little bit. I've been humbled. So I decide maybe diving into the company code base of very experienced OCaml engineers might not be the best play here. So I end up finding, obviously, this course, which was an incredible learning resource, and I still recommend this course to like everyone. Like the YouTube videos that accompany it, like I don't know, it just like worked right in my brain, and it at least got me some training wheels to kind of start reading the syntax and figuring out what's going on. So day 4, after binging CS 3110, I decide it's time to just like, build something. What better way to learn a language than build something? So enter OCaml playlist transfer. This is the first app or tool I've built in OCaml, and I had gone through the CS course, and I was feeling okay, and I was starting to get things together. I went through the dream examples on GitHub. I was like, okay, I can read the syntax now. I kind of get it. Like I was like, I gotta build something. So the premise of this like OCaml playlist transfer tool was, at the same time that I was learning OCaml, I was like on a family plan on Spotify with 4 other strangers I've never met, and it got canceled. So I was like, okay, that sucks. I don't have Spotify anymore. And I coincidentally also got Apple Music for free through my phone plan. So I was like, all right, Apple Music it is. And then I was like, wow, it is really annoying to get my music over to Apple Music. And all the services out there cost like an absurd amount to transfer any amount of songs over. So I'm like, I'm gonna do this myself. So that was the premise of the tool, transferring back and forth between the 2 services, your playlists. And I was feeling productive. Like I said, I had training wheels. I was starting to get code that compiled. I was figuring out the tooling. I got Dune set up right. OPAM wasn't yelling at me. Things were going okay. So day 5, it happens. My light bulb moment, as they might say, and things started to click and fall into place. And I should say the first part of, like the first significant feature of this app was basically authorizing with the 2 services and getting, basically building out the OAuth flow. And how I did that was basically I would start the program, I would spin up a temporary HTTP server, I would launch into the browser with the query parameters, it would redirect the local host, I'd pull the OAuth token, and then I'd send it back to the main process using LWT's mailbox. Super cool, or I guess it's MVAR in LWT. Nailed it. So that is where things started to click. And the catalyst behind this kind of light bulb moment was kind of, I think, unexpected. And if someone told me this was their catalyst today, looking at bind and that being the thing that clicked, I'd be like, I don't believe you. But more specifically, this line of code is what made things click, right? So I'm here looking at this, trying to figure out what all these patterns are, and I'm like thinking back to day one of learning, I'm seeing all these weird let operators, and I kind of realized that I'm like doing some computation over here, and then like unboxing a value over here, and then I'm like, wait a second, hold on just a second here. I know this, right? This is familiar. It's not that much different than what I know in JavaScript using async await. And that just like comparison that I made there, like it just made everything fall in line. Suddenly, I understood how to await, the monads from LWT. And because I understood that, I could realize what's going on with result types, and I could realize what's going on with option types. And I was just like, this all makes sense now. Like, why aren't we doing this in TypeScript? What have we been doing all these years? Like, this is madness. This was basically my, this could just be me at that period of time. So after having worked in OCaml for the better part of 2 years at Scalum, it fundamentally changed the way I think about and approach building software. Well, obviously for the better, I think we'd all agree with that. I was already kind of going down this path at this point in my career of like thinking about types first. I had worked on quite a few projects at Vercel with a developer who was like really, really into Rust. And like he brought Rusty type code into TypeScript and would talk to me about types and all these things. And like for the most part, it went over my head, but like I was starting to see the value in this, right? So this is like something like I preach all the time, people preach all the time, like put guardrails on for people using your code, your coworkers, like try to make doing the right thing easy. I think that's one of the beautiful things about OCaml and other functional programming languages is it generally guides you to doing the safe right thing. Where like, I guess my hot take about TypeScript and JavaScript would be the language from its very core, like basically promotes putting on blinders and like only thinking about the happy path, right? I've talked about this a couple times in other conference talks and on Twitter and on Twitch, but like, it's so easy to like, I work with some of the best TypeScript and JavaScript developers in the world, both at Formidable and at Vercel. And like, we still make these mistakes where it's like, you're writing a new feature, especially on the server, and you're like, oh, well, an error can happen here, but like, my caller can just use a try catch and deal with it. And then that caller's like, well, I don't really want to deal with this. My caller can deal with it. And then suddenly you're getting paged at 2 in the morning for an unhandled promise rejection, right? Not fun. Well, I guess I should have waited to tell that story to the next bullet point, but treating errors as values. I talk a lot about nowadays, specifically because I'm not working in OCaml full time, but like part of my ethos in what I stream is like trying to convince other people that have a similar background to me, right? Like TypeScript and JavaScript developers, that like there are better ways out there and that type systems don't have to suck and be in your way. And one of the biggest things I think the TypeScript and JavaScript community could learn from languages like OCaml is treating errors as values. So I preach that all the time. Also modular programming. Like I love OCaml's module system. Like it, at least to me, it drives me towards simple, like isolated pieces of code that like do one thing or operate over one type, which I think is probably, simple abstractions focused on one type. And I just find that so much, a way more ergonomic way to write software. It makes it more testable and just like simpler and focused on what you're doing. And then also immutability by default. And I think this is starting to become pretty mainstream anyways, right? You look at things like React, like we all have the immutable updates, and this is definitely growing. I mentioned that, maybe I didn't mention, but OCaml like influenced how I write code in other languages, especially TypeScript. I kind of try my best to emulate like how OCaml's module system works with ECMAScript modules. So like I try to design my code in such one file operates over one type, right? So let's say we're in todo.ts, and this is the type that the majority of the functions or combinator is going to work over, right? We just simple to do, nothing crazy going on here. And then generally, I'll just like export this object that has the same name as the type, which there's only a couple circumstances in TypeScript where you can export something with the same name from the same file. It happens to be that an object and a type can like merge together, and then when you import this in another file, it acts as the object and the type, which is kind of like it's a nice pattern, despite being TypeScript. But yeah, this should look relatively familiar, and if you squint, kind of like modules are in OCaml. And you could actually take this a step further. I don't think this would get past code review anywhere, but you can use namespaces and kind of do something really similar. We have our type T, and then we take a T, return a T. Down here we can type things as todo.t. I don't think it would pass, but you definitely can do it. And then you can have our nice little pipe. Definitely not our beloved pipe operator, but it'll make do. Okay, back to my learning experience. During the same time, I was asking a lot of questions in a lot of places. Like I said, OCaml was unlike any language I've really learned before. So I was showing up in places like the ReasonML and OCaml Discord servers and getting help from people like Dave and the rest of the Melange team. I was on the OCaml Discuss forums, maybe not as frequently as other places. On X, the Everything app, TM, just kidding, Twitter. And also Twitch. At the same time, another relatively popular streamer named TJ DeVries, who's a core contributor of NeoVim, was also learning OCaml at the time. So like we both started at the same time. And I would hang out in his Twitch chat back and forth. Antonio would be there chirping in. Sometimes Eduardo would come like out of his markdown file and help. And it was a good time. But something like distinctly stood out to me about this. Every single person across all of those different communities who helped me went so far above and beyond than they needed to, and they were always more than eager to do it. Like I would end up with full code samples in like code playgrounds or on GitHub Gist, and like people would follow up and be like, hey, did that work out? How's it going? And it was just like, it was unlike help that I had gotten from any other community of like software engineers before. At the same time, I was encouraged by TJ and another streamer named the Dev Dad. I should also mention that like around this time I turned 30, and I've never been a morning person in my entire life, but randomly my body was like, we're gonna start waking up at 6 a.m. So like I had started, I've always been like real into like open source and doing side projects and things. And normally up until this point, I was doing these things like after work, and I was like tired and burnt out, not a lot of energy to do the things I wanted to do after, cooking, hang out with your significant other, taking care of the dogs, working out, all those things. So when I started waking up early, I was like, oh, I have energy and I'm like the most excited I am at this part of the day. And I was like, oh, I can just like knock out the things I want to do and be like really happy about it. So I started just taking like 3 hours before work and doing the things I wanted to do. And that included learning OCaml. So like I said, I was nudged into streaming. They were like, just turn on your webcam, see what happens. And like at the time, I thought that was kind of crazy. Like I had never ever considered doing anything like that in my life. I didn't think I really had a good personality for it. I didn't really know how to like set up things, but for whatever reason, people showed up, continue to show up, and it has turned into like this amazing little community of people that I don't know, it's life-changing. So this is a picture early on in my streaming journey. This was the moment that I first successfully transferred a playlist from, I don't know which direction I took it, but it worked nonetheless. I use Neovim, by the way. Yeah, I just am very thankful for all the people that show up on Twitch, that interact with me on any platform. Like, everyone is just amazing. So streaming on Twitch has, more importantly, allowed me to share my interests and meet amazing friends. All right, I'm just gonna go through it. Everyone that shows up on this slide, like, I am incredibly thankful for and grateful for. I would not be in this room. I would not have stuck with OCaml if it was not for the people that show up here. So I just, again, want to give the utmost thanks to you guys. You are amazing. You are the best people ever, and you've made such a positive impact in my life. Thank you. So, what is streaming OCaml like, right? Not only am I starting streaming, but I'm streaming OCaml, which, I had really never heard of. I'm like, this is gonna be me like talking into the void forever. But like I said, people showed up and it kind of took on a life of its own. So the first day I streamed, I was working on part of the playlist transfer tool where I was trying to take a song in a playlist from one of the services and look it up in the other. And I was going down this path of like doing something, now I know, looking back, very naive. I was implementing Levenshtein distance to try to string compare on search APIs by text, and I was like, this is miserable. Someone shows up like the first hour of me streaming OCaml, and they teach me about ISRCD IDs, or I don't know. There is some ID on music that is published on these services that is globally unique and shared across them. And they're like, hey, why don't you check out this ID? They should be in both Apple Music and Spotify. And sure enough, I went from this crazy, text comparison search hack to basically getting an instant lookup on ID. So I was like, that paid off. I'm gonna do this again because I just learned, that was like so helpful. Like, I didn't expect, one, anyone to show up, two, to get like helpful advice and learn something. So I turned on my camera again. Like I said, it has tremendously helped grow my network and meet new friends. Like, I have met all the amazing people in here. I've met people in other developer communities. I've been invited to conferences to speak on different tech topics. Like, it has really just kind of changed a lot for me in an incredibly public way, or positive way. And more importantly, and I've touched on this a bit, but in my in real life, in Raleigh, North Carolina life, I don't have any friends that are in tech. So I don't have this outlet to talk about programming and OCaml and all these things with. And that the 3 hours in the morning that I get to hang out with people on stream is like my outlet that I can share that with. And it's, it's kind of a beautiful thing. And I think the best thing about all of it is that I've somehow managed to inspire others. I've had, at this point, dozens of people reach out to me saying they've tried OCaml for the first time, or they've started considering how they might write their TypeScript more safely using errors as values. Or I sometimes stream about Gleam or just other topics, and we get a lot of people coming to stream that are, might be junior developers or mid-level developers. And I think there's a big lack right now of authentic developer content from senior devs that isn't just like a 4-hour YouTube video or like really clickbaity stuff or hidden articles that only once in a blue moon surface on Hacker News. I think it's really valuable for juniors and mid-level devs to show up and see seniors struggling, see them like learning things and seeing what it's like to actually write code at a more senior level. So I think my too long didn't read of all that and those stories is, as you learn things, just put it out there. Even if you think no one will read it, no one will care about it, maybe you just come back to find it in a couple of years and it's helpful, right? Put things out there, publish blogs, publish videos. Even if you don't think it's helpful, somebody will probably find it and find it helpful. So, looking to the future, I am very excited about the work that is happening and where OCaml is going. I'm, Leo building Riot, the Melange team making it better and better all the time, the GC tuning for multi-core, Picos, like all these things are truly, truly incredible. ODocs getting better, OCaml format getting better. Sabine's team making onboarding for new people better on the documentation site. It's all, I think we are at a period of time where we are doing the things a good language and a good ecosystem should do to get larger adoption. And I think people are starting to see that. And quite honestly, I probably should have reworded this slide. I am very excited about the work that is happening and where OCaml is not going, but growing.